The identity of Jack the Ripper, the infamous serial killer who terrorized London's Whitechapel district in 1888, has been the subject of intense scrutiny, speculation, and conspiracy theories for over a century. The gruesome nature of the murders, coupled with the Ripper's ability to evade capture, has captivated the public imagination for generations. Recent developments, particularly in genetic research, have reignited discussions and brought forth new claims regarding the killer's identity. Join us as we delve into the shadowy streets of Victorian London, examining the evidence and exploring the latest scientific breakthroughs that may finally unmask the face of Jack the Ripper. For over a century, the identity of Jack the Ripper has remained one of history's most perplexing mysteries. The gruesome murders that plagued London's Whitechapel district in 1888 left an indelible mark on the public consciousness, sparking fear and fascination in equal measure. Now, in the 21st century, advancements in DNA technology have breathed new life into the investigation, pointing towards a potential suspect, Aaron Kosminski. In 2014, author and ripperologist Russell Edwards made headlines with his claim that he had finally uncovered the Ripper's true identity. Edwards' assertion centered around a shawl, said to have been found at the murder scene of Catherine Eddowes, one of the Ripper's canonical victims. The shawl, passed down through generations, became the focal point of Edwards' research. Utilizing cutting-edge DNA analysis, Edwards and a team of scientists extracted mitochondrial DNA from the shawl. Mitochondrial DNA, passed down through the maternal line, offered a tantalizing link to the past. The results were astonishing. The DNA profile matched that of a living descendant of Aaron Kosminski, a 23-year-old Polish barber who lived in Whitechapel at the time of the murders. Kosminski, a name whispered among ripperologists for decades, had long been considered a suspect by Scotland Yard. His mental state, documented in asylum records, painted a picture of a troubled individual prone to violence. However, without concrete evidence, Kosminski remained just another name on a long list of potential culprits. Edwards' findings sent shockwaves through the world of forensic science and historical investigation. The DNA evidence published in his book Naming Jack the Ripper seemed to provide the long-sought-after breakthrough in the case. In 2019, a study published in the journal Science added further weight to Edwards' claim. The study, conducted by independent researchers, corroborated the DNA match between the shawl and Kosminski's descendant. The authors concluded that the DNA evidence matches the profile of Aaron Kosminski, lending further credence to the theory that the Polish barber was indeed the elusive Jack the Ripper. However, the scientific community remained divided. Some experts questioned the methodology used in both Edwards' initial analysis and the subsequent study. Concerns were raised about potential contamination of the shawl over the years, as well as the lack of peer review for the 2019 study. Despite the controversy, Edwards and descendants of the Ripper's victims have called for an official inquest to formally recognize Kosminski as the killer. They argue that the DNA evidence, while not definitive, is strong enough to warrant a re-examination of the case. An inquest, they believe, could finally bring closure to the families who have waited over a century for justice. The debate surrounding Aaron Kosminski highlights the complexities of cold case investigations, particularly those shrouded in historical significance. While DNA technology has revolutionized forensic science, it is not without its limitations. Interpretation of DNA evidence, especially in cases as old and notorious as Jack the Ripper, requires meticulous attention to detail and a healthy dose of skepticism. As we delve deeper into the labyrinthine case of Jack the Ripper, we encounter another intriguing suspect, Carl Feigenbaum, a German merchant sailor whose life and crimes cast a long shadow over the Whitechapel murders. Feigenbaum's story, though less widely known than some other Ripper suspects, offers a chilling glimpse into the dark underbelly of Victorian society and the global reach of violence. Feigenbaum's name first surfaced in connection with the Ripper case in the late 20th century, thanks to the tireless research of retired detective Trevor Marriott. Marriott, a seasoned investigator with a keen eye for detail, was drawn to Feigenbaum's case due to the sailor's presence in Whitechapel during the time of the murders and his access to ships docking near the area. Feigenbaum's life, marked by instability and violence, provided fertile ground for suspicion. Born in Germany in 1868, Feigenbaum embarked on a life at sea at a young age, traversing the globe as a merchant sailor. His travels, however, were punctuated by bouts of mental illness and increasingly erratic behavior. In 1894, Feigenbaum's violent tendencies reached a horrific climax in New York City. He was arrested and charged with the brutal murder of his landlady, Juliana Hoffman. The murder, bearing chilling similarities to the Ripper's modus operandi, involved multiple stab wounds to the victim's torso and neck. During his trial, Feigenbaum's lawyers attempted to mount an insanity defense, arguing that their client was not of sound mind at the time of the murder. However, the prosecution presented a compelling case, highlighting Feigenbaum's history of violence and his calculated actions on the night of the murder. The jury ultimately found Feigenbaum guilty of murder, and he was sentenced to death. On April 27, 1896, Feigenbaum was executed at Sing Sing prison, his life of violence and turmoil brought to a grim end. While Feigenbaum's conviction centered on the murder of Juliana Hoffman, his presence in Whitechapel during the Ripper's reign of terror, coupled with the striking similarities between the crimes, has led some to believe that he could be the elusive serial killer. Marriott, in his book Jack the Ripper, The 21st Century Investigation, presents a compelling case for Feigenbaum's guilt. He argues that Feigenbaum's occupation as a sailor would have granted him access to the Whitechapel district, while his knowledge of anatomy, gained through his experiences at sea, could explain the Ripper's surgical precision in mutilating his victims. Furthermore, Marriott points to the fact that Feigenbaum's ship, the Raya, was docked in London during the weeks leading up to and following the Ripper murders. This proximity to the crime scenes, combined with Feigenbaum's documented history of violence, makes him a compelling suspect in the eyes of many. While the case against Carl Feigenbaum remains circumstantial, the evidence, when viewed collectively, paints a disturbing picture. His violent tendencies, coupled with his opportunity and potential motive, cannot be ignored. The possibility that a German merchant sailor, driven by madness and rage, terrorized the streets of Whitechapel remains a haunting reminder of the darkness that can lurk within the human heart. Our exploration of the Jack the Ripper mystery takes us now from the shadowy docks of London to the world of art and the macabre, where we encounter the enigmatic figure of Walter Sickert, a renowned British painter whose life and work have become intertwined with the Ripper legend. Sickert, born in Munich in 1860, rose to prominence in the late 19th and early 20th centuries for his evocative depictions of everyday life in London, often focusing on the city's darker side. His paintings, characterized by their gritty realism and haunting atmosphere, captured the seedy underbelly of Victorian society, a world of poverty, crime and despair. The link between Sickert and Jack the Ripper emerged in the late 20th century, fueled by the work of crime novelist and forensic enthusiast Patricia Cornwell. Cornwell, intrigued by the Ripper case, devoted years of her life and considerable resources to investigating the mystery, ultimately publishing her findings in her 2002 book, Portrait of a Killer, Jack the Ripper Case Closed. Cornwell's theory centered around the striking similarities she perceived between Sickert's artwork and the Ripper crime scenes. She argued that Sickert's paintings, particularly those depicting nude women in various states of undress and vulnerability, betrayed a morbid fascination with violence and the female form. One of the key pieces of evidence cited by Cornwell was Sickert's painting The Camden Town Murder, which depicts the aftermath of a real-life murder that occurred in London in 1907. The painting's stark realism and the vulnerability of the female victim, sprawled lifelessly on a bed, resonated with the brutality of the Ripper murders, leading Cornwell to believe that Sickert was channeling his own dark experiences onto the canvas. Furthermore, Cornwell pointed to a series of letters allegedly written by Jack the Ripper and sent to police at the time of the murders as further evidence of Sickert's guilt. Cornwell claimed that the handwriting in the letters bore a striking resemblance to Sickert's, suggesting that the artist himself was the author of these taunting messages. To bolster her case, Cornwell commissioned DNA analysis of stamps and envelopes associated with Sickert and the Ripper letters. While the results were inconclusive, Cornwell argued that they did not rule out Sickert as a suspect and in fact provided some support for her theory. However, Cornwell's claims have been met with skepticism and outright dismissal from many quarters. Art historians and ripperologists alike have criticized her interpretation of Sickert's work, arguing that she imposed her own preconceived notions onto the paintings, ignoring the artistic context and Sickert's wider body of work. Critics also point out that there is no concrete evidence placing Sickert at the scene of any of the Ripper murders. In fact, some accounts suggest that Sickert was in France during the time of some of the killings, making it geographically impossible for him to have been the perpetrator. The DNA evidence presented by Cornwell has also been called into question, with experts arguing that the samples were too degraded to provide reliable results, and that the methods used were not sufficiently rigorous to meet forensic standards. Despite the controversy, Patricia Cornwell's investigation into Walter Sickert brought renewed attention to the Jack the Ripper case and sparked a debate about the relationship between art, crime, and the dark side of the human psyche. While the case against Sickert remains highly speculative, it serves as a reminder that even the most celebrated figures can harbor hidden depths, and that the line between genius and madness can be perilously thin. Our investigation into the Jack the Ripper case now leads us from the back streets and artist studios to the steps of the British monarchy, where we encounter perhaps the most sensational and controversial suspect of all, Prince Albert Victor, Duke of Clarence and Avondale, grandson of Queen Victoria and second in line to the British throne. The idea that a member of the royal family could be responsible for the gruesome Whitechapel murders seems unthinkable. Yet for over a century, rumours and speculation have swirled around Prince Albert Victor, fueled by whispers of conspiracy, cover-ups, and a desperate need to protect the reputation of the monarchy. Prince Albert Victor, known to his family as Eddie, was a controversial figure in his own right. Plagued by ill health and rumours of scandals throughout his life, he became an easy target for those seeking to explain the Ripper murders through the lens of conspiracy. The theory linking Prince Albert Victor to the Whitechapel murders gained traction in the 1960s and 70s, fueled by a series of books and articles that presented circumstantial evidence and speculative claims suggesting the prince's involvement. One of the most prevalent theories posits that Prince Albert Victor secretly fathered an illegitimate child with a woman in Whitechapel, and that the Ripper murders were orchestrated to silence her and cover up the scandal. According to this theory, the murders were carried out by a member of the royal household or someone acting on their orders, with the victims being women who knew of the prince's secret. Another theory suggests that Prince Albert Victor himself was the killer, driven to madness by syphilis or another debilitating illness. Proponents of this theory point to the prince's reported eccentricities and his alleged presence in Whitechapel around the time of the murders. However, despite the sensational nature of these claims, they lack credible evidence. Historians and ripperologists have debunked many of the claims made about Prince Albert Victor, pointing out inconsistencies, factual errors, and a lack of credible sources. For instance, the claim that Prince Albert Victor fathered an illegitimate child has been widely disputed, with no contemporary evidence to support it. Similarly, claims that the prince was in Whitechapel at the time of the murders have been challenged by historical records that place him elsewhere during those periods. The royal family has consistently denied any involvement in the Ripper murders, dismissing the allegations as baseless and offensive. They argue that Prince Albert Victor, despite his flaws, was not capable of such horrific crimes, and that the theories surrounding him are nothing more than malicious gossip. While the case against Prince Albert Victor is weak at best, the enduring fascination with the royal family and the allure of conspiracy theories have kept his name alive in the annals of the Ripper case. The idea that a prince could be a secret killer protected by a powerful and shadowy network continues to capture the imagination, even in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Our investigation into the Jack the Ripper mystery now takes us across the Atlantic to the bustling metropolis of Chicago, where we encounter a figure as chilling and enigmatic as Jack himself, H. Holmes, America's first serial killer. Herman Webster Mudgett, better known by his alias H. Holmes, was a con artist and murderer of the highest order, operating in the late 19th century. His crimes, characterized by their meticulous planning and cold-blooded execution, shocked and horrified a nation, earning him the moniker the Beast of Chicago. Holmes's reign of terror centered around his infamous murder castle, a labyrinthine hotel he built in Chicago's Englewood neighborhood in the 1880s. The hotel, a macabre masterpiece of deception, was designed with secret passages, hidden rooms and gas chambers, allowing Holmes to trap and kill his victims with impunity. While Holmes's confirmed crimes took place in Chicago, some theorists, including his own descendant, Jeff Mudgett, have proposed a startling possibility that Holmes, driven by an insatiable bloodlust, traveled to London during his reign of terror and committed the Jack the Ripper murders. The theory linking Holmes to the Whitechapel murders rests on several intriguing, albeit circumstantial, pieces of evidence. Firstly, Holmes was known to travel extensively, often under assumed names, making it plausible that he could have been in London during the Ripper's reign of terror. Secondly, Holmes's modus operandi, characterized by cunning, manipulation, and a chilling lack of remorse, bears some resemblance to the Ripper's methods. Both killers targeted vulnerable women, often engaging in deception and trickery to lure them to their deaths. Furthermore, Holmes was known to possess medical knowledge, having graduated from the University of Michigan's Department of Medicine and Surgery. This anatomical expertise, some argue, could explain the Ripper's surgical precision in mutilating his victims. Jeff Mudgett, a former attorney and the great-great-grandson of H. Holmes, has become one of the most vocal proponents of the theory linking his ancestor to the Ripper murders. Mudgett, who's spent years researching his family history, claims to have uncovered compelling evidence in Holmes's diaries and personal effects that point to his guilt. Mudgett's evidence includes cryptic entries in Holmes's diaries that coincide with the timeline of the Ripper murders, as well as sketches and drawings that bear a disturbing resemblance to the Ripper's victims and crime scenes. Mudgett also claims that Holmes possessed a collection of surgical instruments, similar to those believed to have been used by the Ripper, which he kept hidden in his murder castle. However, despite the intrigue surrounding H. Holmes and his potential connection to the Jack the Ripper case, the evidence remains largely circumstantial. No concrete proof exists to place Holmes in London during the time of the murders, and many of Mudgett's claims have been met with skepticism from historians and Ripperologists. Critics argue that the similarities between Holmes's crimes and the Ripper murders are superficial at best, and that attributing the Whitechapel killings to Holmes is a case of sensationalism overshadowing sound judgment. They point out that Holmes's known victims were primarily women he lured to his murder castle, while the Ripper's victims were women he attacked on the streets of London, suggesting a different modus operandi. While the theory that H. Holmes was Jack the Ripper is unlikely to be definitively proven or disproven, it serves as a reminder of the enduring power of mystery and the human fascination with the darkest corners of the human psyche. The possibility that one man could be responsible for such widespread terror on two continents continues to captivate the imagination, even in the absence of conclusive evidence. The mystery surrounding Jack the Ripper has given rise to numerous conspiracy theories, often involving elaborate plots and cover-ups. One of the most prominent is the royal conspiracy theory, popularized by Stephen Knight's book Jack the Ripper, The Final Solution. This theory posits that the murders were orchestrated to protect the royal family from scandal involving high-ranking officials and Freemasons. Despite its popularity in fiction and media, the theory lacks substantial evidence and has been widely discredited. Over a century after the Whitechapel murders, the identity of Jack the Ripper remains an enigma, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk in the heart of even the most civilized societies. The passage of time has done little to diminish the fascination with this case, as people continue to be drawn to the mystery, the horror, and the enduring possibility of unmasking the killer. While we may never know for certain who Jack the Ripper was, the search for his identity has illuminated the dark underbelly of Victorian London, exposing the social inequalities, the poverty and the violence that festered beneath the surface of respectability. The Ripper's legacy is a complex one, a mixture of horror and intrigue that continues to captivate and haunt us to this day. For more information, visit the link in the description.